Shalom. Welcome to Awaken to Torah. This week's Torah portion is going to be Shemot, or Exodus, chapter 27, verse 20, through Exodus, chapter 30, verse 10. The Torah portion's name is Tetzave, and it is our 20th Torah portion of this Torah cycle. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail in this Torah portion, just as I did not go into a lot of detail in the last Torah portion over temple furnishings, the stuff that was assembled to make the temple, to make the curtains, so on and so forth. This week's Torah portion is you shall order. So this is the Father giving Moses instructions on how to make the clothing for Aaron and his sons. The high priest's clothing, of course, was different. I'm going to just go through the list and kind of read through the Torah portion where the things change, and it starts talking about a different event or a different type of clothing that's being made. But I'm not going to elaborate a whole lot on this. I feel like if we're really going to talk about this, then we need to devote a lot of study to it, a lot of attention to it. Normally when I do this, just over what the temple consisted of and what the priest's clothing consisted of, we may be 6 to 10 weeks in service just talking about those things, because there's such a great message in them, and there's such detail that the Father expected to be done during that time and during the assembling of these temple parchments or temple furniture and the clothing and the way the bread was to be made and the positioning of everything and how Aaron was supposed to look when he walked into the holy place, the incense that were supposed to be offered on the altar, the dividing of the animals that were going to be sacrificed, what parts was burned inside the tabernacle and what was taken with outside the camp to be consumed. There's just a lot of great details in there, and there's a lot of great messages in there. You have to kind of jump around back and forth to see the types and the foreshadows of what the Father was doing by each and everything that he was doing in this particular Torah portion and the previous Torah portion. So with that said, I'm just not going to elaborate a whole lot on them, because I don't want to do them an injustice trying to run through this in 10 minutes or less. So in Exodus chapter 27, verse 20, we see that Moses is commanded how to light the oil or place the oil in the lamps, and what was supposed to be done during that, and how long the lamp was supposed to be burning, and so on and so forth. I want you to read that so you understand the significance of everything that happened. So again, I'm not going to elaborate a whole lot. I just want to give you little clues and little insights into what was being done. In Exodus chapter 28, verse 1, we start seeing the Father command Moses on the vestments or the clothing of the priesthood. He begins with Aaron, of course, at first, and goes through every little detail about his undergarments, even the chalbia, or the undergarment of the robe, even, and then the robe and the breastplate. In verse 6 of chapter 28, he starts talking about the ephod. In verse 15 of chapter 28, he starts talking about the breastplate. Now, there's a 10-hour message in just the breastplate alone. I mean, the way it was assembled, the chain made out of pure gold, beaten brass, the stones had to be engraved with each name of one of the 12 tribes of Israel, as a jeweler would engrave them. I mean, so this wasn't some just thrown together piece. This was a fine work of art, and it was very specifically detailed the way the Father wanted it done, to what positions He wanted each stone to be placed in, to where He wanted it to fall upon Aaron over his heart. So the sins of the people would be upon Aaron's heart when he came in before the Father. When we look at these things and we begin to understand that there was a reason, because the Father is holy in everything He does, and there was a reason that the Father wanted this done. There was a reason for every little detail. In verse 31 of chapter 28, the Father starts talking about the other priest's vestments, Aaron's sons. Of course, they didn't have the big fancy robe and the turban and the crown. They had different vestments because they were like a filing rank structure. So their vestments were different than the high priest, or their clothing was different than the high priest. But even them, I mean, they had to have, even He went to such great detail, even talking about how He wanted the undergarments made, that would cover their loins, that would go from their waist to their thighs. I mean, just great detail in every aspect of what the Father was telling them to do here. Then in chapter 29, chapter 29 verse 1, the Father starts talking about the organization of the priest, and how this organization was supposed to last for 7 days, and what was supposed to happen, what sacrifices were supposed to take place, a morning sacrifice, an evening sacrifice, a bull, a ram, a lamb of the first year. I mean, the unleavened wafer, the leavened bread, the oil, the wine. I mean, everything. He went into very specific details about what was supposed to take place during this organization. The drink offerings, the meat offerings, the animal sacrifices, so on and so forth. All has a purpose, and it all has a message behind it that we need to know and we need to understand. But again, we don't have time to go into that in this little short synopsis of this Torah portion. Exodus 29 verse 38, the Father starts talking about the daily offerings. I've already highlighted that, a lamb in the morning and a lamb in the evening. We're supposed to burn incense on the altar in the morning time and in the evening time during the morning and the evening tamid, or the morning and the evening sacrifices. In chapter 30 verse 1 through 10, that's where He starts talking about the incense burning during that morning tamid and that evening tamid sacrifice of the animals. Most people don't realize, and just kind of we'll get into it a little bit later when we get into that Torah portion, but we always talk about not doing any work on Shabbat and so on and so forth, and we should talk about those things, but we need to understand that the priest's duty was actually doubled on the Sabbath. The sacrifices were doubled during the feast times. I mean, their duties were immense. I mean, they were having to offer sacrifice for everyone. Then when we start getting into the sin sacrifices and the trespass offerings and so on and so forth, I mean, there is so much work for the priest to do. They didn't just come in and offer a morning sacrifice and an evening sacrifice, which is immense in itself. They were having to offer other sacrifices as well. But this Torah portion is talking about the cleansing and the making holy of the priesthood for these 7 days, so they could operate as the priest. So I hope you've enjoyed this Torah portion. I hope you read through it and you have some clarity on what's taking place here. The Father's making the priesthood holy so they can be a of service to Him, to be able to come into the holy place, to the once a year to be able to come into the holies of holies. This is just a wonderful thing that we see, a picture and an example of how we need to clean our lives up to be righteous and to be holy before the Father. Hope you've enjoyed this Torah portion from Awaken to Torah. We'll see you next week. Shalom, shalom.